Jenny, can you mute everybody?
Good question. There's probably a way, I just don't know how to do it.
Just hover over top of them and you get the option to mute or ask them to mute.
Oh, I get it.
I think most have been coming on muted.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, we got Kate coming.
So maybe we can start, hey?
I'm just letting a couple more in here. Just give them a couple seconds to get on. We got a whole bunch coming all at once here. And then just give me a sec to get them. It's a full-time job letting everybody in.
Yeah, it is. I see that.
Okay, if you want to go ahead, Jessica, and get started, we'll get rolling.
Sure, sounds great. So, hi everybody, my name is Jessica Rosthern and I'm working with Sage Hill Community Futures and the Indigenous Business Development Program, coordinating this series of business-related webinars for entrepreneurs. We have a huge group today and we're really excited about this. This is the largest group we've had so far, and it is about GST and PST today with Trevor King out of Rosthern, Saskatchewan. And I'm going to introduce, well, let Sherilyn introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sherilyn Walters, and I'm the facilitator consultant with the Indigenous Business Development Program, also working in partnership with Sage Hill and Jessica, and helping with all these workshops that have been going on since June of 2020. Had to think about that for a minute. So we were just saying earlier that if we start to see any delays in the speaking, or we start to freeze up, we're just going to ask everyone to shut their videos off, and that would allow us to capitalize as much as possible. And then I guess, Jessica, if I'm not mistaken, we'll hold all questions till the end of the presentation to get through the material first.
Yes, that's correct. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, and then Trevor can get to all the questions at the end, just because we do have a fair amount of material to cover.
Okay, off to you, Jenny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Glessman, and I'm with the Sage Hill Community Futures Office. I'm the one trying to let everybody in today. We're so happy to see such a good group. With that, we are recording today, and that will be sent out to everybody so that they can review it, because with this wonderful tax stuff, we might want to watch it again. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Trevor, and we will let him take it away.
Who's got something playing in the background?
Yeah, someone has. Yeah, there we go.
Got the TV on.
Yeah.
Right on. My name's Trevor King. I'm one of the managing partners of Prairie Padgett Tax and Accounting here in beautiful sunny Rosthern. This is my second webinar series with this program. The first one was really well received. We went through business deductions and had a lot of good questions, although we didn't make it all the way through the material. So what we're going to do today is we're going through GST and PST, and it can become very heavy and very dull, to be completely honest. But you guys will have a copy of my presentation. We'll do all the questions at the end. Either type them in the chat. If you have a really complicated question, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat so everyone can get a hold of me. Email is probably the best. That way I can respond to you and kind of give me some background. So as far as established businesses, what different industries is everyone in? Or do we want to do all this at the end?
Yeah, I think we might want to wait until the end, Trevor.
Okay. In that case, we'll get the show on the road here. You need to share my screen. And we'll go with this one. Okay, can everybody see this? Someone?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
I couldn't get
Just need-
unmuted.
Just need one. Okay, now I gotta find a spot to put this window. All right. So, like I said, I'm one of the managing partners here in Prairie Padgett in our wonderful Prairie Cove Business Center here in Rosthern. I'm going to take you guys through GST and PST and all the fun little nuances that occur with that. So we'll go through the basis of GST, what is an input tax credit and how it applies to you, how to collect and remit, PST, how PST is different. There's no input tax credit for PST, there's merely purchase exemption. And then, like we talked about before, those lovely remittance and filing dates. That is something you got to stay on top of as a business owner. It's your responsibility to make sure that you're meeting those reports and you're paying on time, or if you're not paying on time, you're making arrangements. Okay, so GST is that 5% that we pay on top of everything, charged on all taxable sales of goods and services. You have to start charging GST once you exceed $30,000 over 4 consecutive quarters or $30,000 in a single quarter. Now they define a quarter as the calendar quarter, so January 1st to March 31st, April 1st to June 30th, etc. You can voluntarily register for GST and take advantage of what's called the input tax credits. If any of you come from a farming background, farming is one of those things that is GST exempt. So oftentimes you'll pay GST on your supplies and then you just claim the credit back. And we'll go through how all that fits together and what exactly I mean by what an input tax credit is. The $30,000 threshold means once you've made $30,000 over the course of that quarter, or if you've made over $30,000 in a calendar year or 4 consecutive quarters together. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out. You're going to know once you get to the point where you need to start charging GST. And I mean, if you're in a business that's more than just a casual thing where you're actively working at it, you're going to want to register for GST anyways. That way you can start claiming the input tax credit. And opens you up because lots of, especially if you're bidding on government work. So if you want to work with the government of Canada or even the government of Saskatchewan, they're going to expect you to have a GST and a PST number for that matter. Basically legitimizes your business, shows that you're in it for the long term, and gives you a little more representation with the government. Oh, I go back there. All right, input tax credit. Basically, if you're purchasing items for your business, any purchases or expenses related to a commercial activity, you can claim the amount of GST that you paid as an input tax credit. Now there's a form, when you fill out your GST form, there'll be a section that says input tax credit, and that's all the GST that you paid. Purchase is subject to the reasonability test. I mean, it has to be related to your business. And this is one thing that people often get stuck on is they start a business and they invest heavily in it, right? If you start any kind of manufacturing, even service industry, you buy a lot of equipment, you buy stock, you buy material, and then it comes to the end of the year and you're like, oh, I should claim all my GST credits. If you have not applied for a GST number prior to when you made the purchase, you cannot back claim GST. Once you've made the purchase, if you don't have a GST number, there's no way to claim that back. They will not allow it. They're very, very firm on that. So you have to be a GST registrant in order to claim your input tax, right? So you buy a company vehicle, right, $60,000, and you pay $3,000 in GST. If you don't have your GST number, the money's just gone. You can't claim it back. So it's really important, and you really need, especially if you're in the planning phases, you're setting up your business. You know, if you're just small and you're just starting out and you don't want the extra hassle, that's fine. You know, if you're considered a small supplier, if you're under the $30,000, you're not required to register for GST. But if you are making that next step, say you've done your little business incubator and you've looked at your revenues and like, yes, this is viable, we're going forward with it, apply for a GST number early. That way you can claim your input tax credits, especially if you're going to make a large purchase, invest heavily in your business. You need to be claiming back everything you possibly can, right? Because business startups, what'll sink your small business isn't that you don't have any revenue, it's that you don't have any cash flow, right? And that's just 5% back on your startup costs is a significant amount. Great. So, collecting and remitting GST. I have worked with a lot of clients in the past who have come and said, well, I haven't filed my GST in a couple of years. And you need to stay on top of that. You can, once you have your number and you're registered, you have 4 years to claim the GST from the initial due date of your remittance. Now what that means is, say 2020 was your first year and you have a December 31st year end. You have 4 years from when that December 31st report was due in order to claim your tax credits. Now typically, especially in retail and service operations, they want to file on time because they don't want to get penalized, especially if they owe. But with companies that are exempt from GST or farming operations, they often fall behind, and the government won't remind you that you need to file your GST because you're typically claiming a credit. Especially with some transport companies, it's called interlining is the actual term for it. So they're transporting material from one site to another. They're not required to charge GST on that cost, but they are allowed to claim GST as a tax credit. So you have 4 years to claim it. After that 4 years, you can't claim the credits anymore. But if you owe GST, believe me, the government is still going to want it, no matter how many years old it is. Right. Now there is some things that change when you go from being just a regular a small business to now you're charging and remitting GST. Right. Now the numbers at the top, I pulled this chart direct from the CRA. So you have to have your name, the date of the invoice, total amount paid or payable. And then there's what's called zero rated supplies and exempt supplies, and we'll go through that a little bit later. These are what you need to list on your invoices, right? So for small, under $30 of GST, you don't need a lot more information, but as you charge more and more, and you have larger and larger invoices going out, you need to have more information on your invoices as required by the Revenue Canada. Right, so if you're charging, like the most information you need to have is the far right column. I mean, you have to charge $150 or more of GST. You need to have your terms of payment and a description, and then if you use an authorizing agent, your business number. I recommend to anyone, if you have GST and PST numbers, when you set up your invoices, just list your GST and PST number on there. It's that way you don't have to worry about changing it as your business grows. You can use the same invoicing system, and you're going to need it, especially if you use the same system for purchases because you can buy some items PST exempt for resale and whatnot. Right, so I brought up zero-rated supplies. Now, zero-rated supplies and exempt supplies are different. Zero-rated supplies are your basic groceries, agricultural products, farm livestock, prescription drugs are considered zero-rated. Exempt supplies would be exports fall under the exemption. And then if you're in a transport industry, you're trucking over the border, if it originates outside of Canada or the destination is outside of Canada, it's considered zero-rated. So for example, when it comes to farming, and this is probably the best example I have, just because I deal a lot with farmers who claim their GST. If they pay GST on supplies, fencing, lumber, materials, all of that GST that they pay is in order to produce livestock. They can claim all of that back as part of their GST, because they don't charge GST when they sell their livestock or their grain or any of their agricultural products. Now, exempt supplies. This is you don't pay GST when you sell a house. You're not required to. Right? Rentals, like if anyone's ever rented a house or a condo or an apartment, you don't pay GST on your rent. It's something that's considered exempt. Medical services, again, exempt. Vocational, secondary school are exempt from GST. Banks don't charge GST; those are exempt services. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but this is a fairly good generalization of everything that follows under the exempt supplies. Right. All of these, like anyone who's taken post-secondary education, you weren't required to pay GST on your tuition costs. Now, as a registrant, right? So you call the CRA and you list your business, you get a business number. It's a 9-digit number followed by RT, and then typically it's 0001. That's your GST registrant number. So basically, you collect the money for GST for the year, and then at the end of the year, when you file your GST, you pay the government what you owe them. You can subtract what you've paid for input tax credit, and you give the government the difference. So if you had, for example, your first couple of years, you had some heavy losses, just because you're in the growth phase, you would often end up with a GST credit, right? Especially if you've invested heavily on the front end and you haven't quite got to the point where you're overly profitable. And GST collection is different than claiming a deduction for your capital cost allowance for equipment. Like you just claim the GST up front. GST is not something that you claim a little bit every year. You claim the total amount that you paid right up front within the reporting period. Now, things that are not included in GST. So supplies made outside Canada, zero-rated exports of property and services, zero-rated supplies, financial services, any exempt supplies, taxable sales of capital real property, and goodwill. Now, goodwill is something that when you buy a business, so say for example, you buy a local business that you know, right? And a business is more than just the collection of the assets and you know, it's the name. So the goodwill is attached to the name of the business. It's the reputation you're buying, right? So that's something that is not taxable as far as GST, because goodwill is entirely subjective, right? You can, basically goodwill is the amount that you negotiate over and above what the business is worth. Right, so now this is very important. You have assigned and optional reporting periods for GST. So if you're under 1.5 million, you're going to have an annual reporting period. Now you do have the option of going to a monthly or quarterly system. That entirely depends on how organized you are as a small business owner and how much work you want to put into it. I mean, if you are worried that, okay, if I wait till the end of the year, I won't have the money, I won't set it aside, or it'll get used up in some other aspect of your business, then by all means, go to a quarterly reporting system or a monthly reporting system. It is more work, but once you've set up a system, right, where, okay, at the end of the month, this is what I made, this is my GST I paid on supplies, subtract the difference and file your report online. It's really easy to file. It's all done online. You enter your 4-digit code, brings you in, you fill in all the blanks, and then it tells you how much you owe. You pay that typically online through your bank, and then you're off and running for the next month. As you make more and more, the government obviously is going to want their GST a little more regularly, because they don't want you to be sitting on that much money for the year. They want to get their portion as quickly as possible. Right. So due dates, and this is something that I find people often overlook. So if you're on a monthly reporting system, it's due 1 month after your report is over. Quarterly, it's due 1 month after your report is over. The only thing is when you get into an annual return, now most small businesses, because you're a sole proprietorship, you'll end up with a calendar year end, just like your personal tax. On a December 31st year end, if you have a balance owing, you have to pay by April the 30th. You don't have to file your return until June 15th. I know, which sounds confusing, but that is the system the government has set up. The reason it is set up that way is for sole proprietors that are farmers. They don't have to file the report until June 15th. That way the government doesn't have to issue them their GST check until sometime in July, right? Because for all the other small business owners, if you have a balance owing and you don't, you figure, oh, you know, I'll pay when I file, you're going to get penalized. So just get in the habit of doing it the following month, no matter what reporting system you're using. Do it the following month and stay on top of it, and you will have a much easier time dealing with Revenue Canada. If you have, now the other reporting period is for other fiscal year ends. This applies to corporations that have, say their busy time is in the winter, right? Say they rent, you rent snowmobiles, right? You don't want to be doing your year end December 31st, right? You're at the height of your busy season. Say their year ends July 31st. That means they have until the end of October to file and remit the GST, right? When all their other fiscal reports are due, it's when their company financials are due. That's the only time that applies. So if you're simply a sole proprietorship, it's a smaller business, less than 1.5 million a year, you're going to have an annual GST return due December. The year end will be December 31st. Your payments due April 30th, and you got to file by the 15th of June. Now, when you register for GST, this is the fun part about registering for GST is if your small business operates and your mailing address is a box number, you cannot apply online. You have to physically call Revenue Canada and explain to them what your address is. Like if you have a land location or you get your mail delivered to a box number, you have to call them and get them to register you for GST. Then they'll mail you this fun little package with your 4-digit access code and instructions on how it works. I mean, the instructions are written by the CRA, so they are not the clearest. But if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help people with this GST net file or ensure that they're within their reporting deadlines. Now, this is a question I get a lot is, what do I do if I cannot pay my GST? My first instinct is to say, there's a saying about a creek and no paddle, because that's where you are. My initial advice would be, once you file your GST, you file it and you realize that, oh my, I haven't been staying on top of it. I've spent all the money that I earned through my GST and I owe the government. Call Revenue Canada and make arrangements. And this is something that I encourage lots of my small business owners. I know they don't like to have extra bank accounts because oftentimes as the lowest fee you're going to find is probably $5 a month. So that's $60 a year out of your pocket, but have a tax account, right? You issue your invoice, you get paid, say you're collecting both GST and PST and you're issuing a $1,000 invoice, you know, $111 of that is tax when it comes back. That goes into the separate account. Just put it away. That way it's not part of your regular revenue stream and you're not tempted to use it. That way when you get to the end of the year, your PST is all set aside. So is your GST. And hey, you get to keep a little bit of it in that account because you can claim the tax credits. Right? That'll keep you, that is the easiest way to stay ahead of it. Otherwise you get to the end of the year and you know you had a really good year and you made $50,000 or $60,000. Well, now you got to come up with $3,000 to pay Revenue Canada, right? Because you've spent the GST you've collected. All right, now Jessica, if you're okay with it, we're only about half an hour in. Do we want to do all the questions at the end, or do we want to do GST specific questions now? Because the rules for GST and PST are different, and they're administered in a different format.
I think maybe for simplicity, maybe we should do the GST questions quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
that sounds good to me.
Okay, so I'll just start reading from the chat. That's a PST one. So the first one says, so if you can't back claim GST, can you claim the total amount of the expense? Can you, so if you didn't have your GST, the way I would understand it, if you didn't have your GST number, and so there's a $100 GST you can't claim, can you claim that all as the expense?
Yes, because GST is an expense that you paid. And that's where it gets a little more complicated because once you're registered for GST, you can no longer claim that GST as a business expense because it's no longer an expense, it's a credit for you.
So did that answer the question? I can't remember, Michelle asked that one, I think. Okay, so our next one says, does a janitor have to charge GST to the company they offer services to if they are just over the 30,000 point? Already charging for PST, just wondering about the GST.
I mean, once you reach the $30,000 threshold in, if you're over $30,000 in those 3 calendar quarters, then yes, you're going to be required to register and remit GST. I mean, If you're $29,850, then you're under the threshold and you're not required to.
But if
Well,
you're
once
$1 over,
if you're 10 cents over, a cent over, they'll want it. I mean, if you have to look at it from your position as a business owner, yes, you are passing those costs on to your client, but I mean, you also get to claim back the input tax credits.
okay, so hopefully we got that one answered. The next one is, what information is needed from the company you make a purchase from? Is their business number required for, say, on an invoice of $3,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you're charging GST, if you're a GST registrant and you're sending out your invoices, your GST number should be on that invoice.
Okay, our next one says, if a business registered for GST and collected GST but did not make 30,000 in the quarter, do they still remit the GST?
If you're a registrant, you have to. That's called voluntary registration. Yes, you can't charge GST and then keep the money. It's not how it works, because it's not GST. Technically, you're merely like the caregiver of it while it's in your possession. You have to eventually remit it to the federal government. I mean, there is a lot of different reasons that people will voluntarily register for GST. Mostly, if you want to do government work, you need a GST number.
And then our next one is, what is the convenience fee for paying online? Is there a fee?
Like from your bank?
Sherilyn asked that one. I know I pay through my bank and there's no charge, but is that what is the convenience fee? I don't know. Sherilyn, can you explain a little bit about that one? Here's another question with GST. Do you have to claim GST on taxidermy work if you're over the 30,000?
Taxidermy work falls under the exemptions.
Okay. If you just started a business, to file GST, would you need an access code?
Yes, you should get a 4-digit access code when you initially register for GST. And then the government, I haven't seen one lately, but usually they mail you reminders annually and it'll have your 4-digit access code on it. If not, they're really good about giving it to you. If you call and give them your business number, they'll be able to mail you out your access code, because I mean, it's in their best interest that you file and remit your GST, because it's money that's owed to them.
And one more, where to register? The person's not sure if I'm registered, not charging currently. So where do they go to register?
You register with Revenue Canada under taxes, GST, register online. It's a fairly linear process. That being said, if you have a box number as a mailing address, you need to call Revenue Canada GST line and register that way. They'll ask you some basic questions about your business, along with some background information, and then issue you a GST business number.
There was a question, and I saw it, and now I can't see it. It was a question about if you run your business on the reserve.
Yeah, I'm just reading that one.
Oh, sorry. Do all the GST rules still apply?
Depends who you're selling to and who you're buying from, but I have a handy little slide that explains that at the end, because on reserve, off reserve, GST, PST rules get really messy really quick. But the short answer is no. If GST and PST don't apply to businesses based on reserve, provided they are selling their services on reserve.
To First Nations.
Yes. Well, to anyone that's exempt, right? Because some First Nations organizations fall under the exemption, as well as there's urban reserves that are on treaty land. They are also under the exemption. But I do have a slide that explains that at the end,
Okay.
because it can get really complicated as well. Do I charge it? Do I not charge it? It's just like interprovincially, it changes based on where your product is going.
Okay, I think I just have a couple more and then we'll switch to PST. What happens if a lot of your clients are First Nation and you deliver services on reserve? So, and it says, so that business, your intake may be over 30,000. So do I charge off reserve the GST? No, that's right. So do I charge off reserve the GST to off reserve only? I do security guard training and drug alcohol testing. That's a complicated one.
It isn't. I mean,
okay, good.
if your off reserve revenue is $30,000, then I mean you gotta to charge and remit your GST. You're probably going to want to register for GST anyways. That way you can claim the input credits. But you are correct in that you do not have to charge if you're based on reserve and you're training on reserve and you're selling to someone who's also exempt. You do not have to charge the GST or the PST.
Okay. One more. Did you say? No, this is just I think a clarification. It's saying. Did you say that when approaching the 30,000 we register, but the money under 30,000 is not subject to charge to the government?
No. So we'll just clarify that right now. The $30,000 threshold in the 3 quarters, right? So over the course of 3 quarters, you've made more than $30,000. You're required to register for GST. Now, once you are registered for GST, right? So say I've discovered today, I got to register for GST and I get my GST number today. Every sale going forward, charge GST on.
But all the money that I made prior to that, where I didn't charge GST, I don't have to go back and try to collect. Is that correct?
That is correct, because you didn't have a GST number. It's the same as the input tax credit. Kind of works both ways.
Okay.
Right.
And my last one, is the GST collected less,
minus the input tax
credit equals the total amount remitted, the same as saying what I pay to the government equals GST minus what GST credit I claim equals the total amount remitted?
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to say yes. Yes.
Yep. The formula works both ways there.
Yep. Okay.
It's a roundabout way of doing it, but okay.
Yeah. I think for the moment that's most of the GST questions. So we'll lead on to PST, and then there was a couple of PST ones that we'll go back to.
Okay. Yeah. Everyone's still awake. This is, I know how exciting GST and PST. Even I find GST and PST pretty dull, but we'll get through it. PST is a little bit different. So the threshold for PST is 10 grand. If you do more than $10,000 in sales in a year, you got to register for PST. And based on your business, the government will either issue you a vendor number or a registered consumer number. And the Saskatchewan government has this wonderful little program called SETS. It's Saskatchewan E-Tax Services. It is probably the most frustrating government program to use. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it'll take your password, sometimes it won't, and sometimes you'll spend an hour on hold. But once you get it set up, it is fairly easy to use. It just can be painful to get going. Now, and this is important, if you purchase taxable goods or services from a supplier for use within Saskatchewan, so say you're based in the Range and you buy a vehicle for your business, you decide that, you know what, I'm going to buy it in Alberta and I'll save myself the 6%. Not going to happen. you have to self-assess and pay the PST directly to Revenue Division of the Saskatchewan government. That is something that I find a lot of business owners are unaware of, just because it's not a real common thing. Even if you're buying software, for example, like I buy my software out of Ontario, and you have to self-assess and pay the PST. It's called consumption. Pay the consumption tax to the Revenue Division. Now, most small businesses will be on an annual reporting for the PST. That changes how much tax you're collecting and remitting annually, quarterly, monthly. I mean, if you're doing more, and this tax reported is not taxable sales, that's total tax collected, right? So if you're doing more than 100 grand a year in sales, right, that's going to be $6,000 a year. You're going to be on a quarterly remittance, right? Once you're collecting more than 12 grand a year in PST, you got to remit monthly. Now, the big difference between GST, oh, this is a nil return. No, I thought I had a different. Okay, so a nil return, and this will come up often when you see PST, especially in your PST package. When you register for it, the government mails you out this handy little envelope, about 20 pages in it, full of, it'll have a sample remittance voucher, and it'll have all your reporting information. You still have to file what's called a nil return. So say you go a year and your business you've decided that you're working mostly out of province. You're selling all of your widgets into Alberta, right? If you're selling into Alberta or another province, you don't have to charge the PST, right? But if you don't collect any PST, you still have to file a nil report. And a nil report is you tell the government, yep, I didn't make any taxable sales this year. You still have to file it. It's due the 20th of the month following the end of the reporting period. So January 20th is a really busy time for me because those annual businesses come December 31st, you got 20 days to figure out your PST and remit it and pay it. Now, there is no input tax credit for PST. Tax is payable on all business use goods other than goods purchased for resale. There are input tax credits for GST and for goods consumed by a business. Now, you can claim an exemption for PST on any taxable goods or taxable service that you purchase and intend to resell, such as inventory. So say you manufacture fireplace mantles for an RTM company. This is an example I'm going to use. You don't charge the company that's building the RTMs PST because they're not the final consumer. The person that they sell the house to is, right? Or you build apparel. You have a screen printing shop. You can buy your supplies PST exempt. All you do is provide your whoever you're buying from with your PST number, and you buy them PST exempt, and then you charge PST on the final sale, right? But for stuff that you buy that you pay PST on, there's no input tax credit available. It's not how it works with the PST system. So there is a long list of items that are exempt. This is the taxidermy question that is exempt from PST. All your daycare, healthcare services, beauty salons, agriculture, prescription drugs, your basic grocery items, that's exempt from PST. And that interliners, that follows under this couriers hauling goods on behalf of others. Those are exempt from PST. Right, so, and this is just to clarify, because this can become really confusing. So if you're selling within Saskatchewan, you charge GST and PST. If you're selling outside of Saskatchewan, but still within Canada, you charge GST only, right? So you're selling into Alberta where there is no provincial tax, you charge the GST. If you're selling outside of Canada, you do not apply sales tax. It's called a zero rated good, and there's no sales tax applied on exports. Now, and this doesn't really apply to you guys because you guys are all based in Saskatchewan, but say you were based in Calgary and you were selling into Prince Albert and you were doing quite a bit of revenue, business was going well. If you're selling into Saskatchewan and you're over that $10,000 threshold, you need to register and charge and remit the PST to the Saskatchewan government in order to be within what they expect, right, as a business owner. Now, this is the question about GST, PST exemptions regarding First Nations band or a band powered entity. And this is direct, I took this right off of CRA, right? So you buy goods on reserve and you fall under the Indian Act, you do not pay GST or PST. You fall under, you buy goods off reserve and the vendor or the vendor's agent delivers goods to the reserve, right? So you're back on treaty land, you do not pay GST and PST. Now, if you're an incorporated band-powered entity and you buy goods off reserve, they still have to be delivered and they have to be accepted on reserve land. You do not pay GST and PST. Now, if you buy goods off reserve land and you used your own vehicle to transport them back, you are subject to GST and PST. Now, if you buy goods off reserve from a vendor who qualifies and operates a remote store, which would be like a northern store, present your proper documentation that proves that you fall under the Indian Act, you are exempt from GST and PST. Now, where it gets really complicated is if you import goods into Canada, you have to pay GST and PST, even after importation. Canada Post, the vendor or the vendor agents delivers goods to the reserve. All right, and this is right off of the CRA's website because I think they often get a lot of questions about whether GST or PST applies and who is exempt and who isn't exempt. So this kind of clarifies it a little bit, right? So basically, if you operate on reserve land and you sell goods to another reserve or someone who operates on reserve land, they do not pay GST or PST. They are exempt under the Indian Act as defined by CRA. And I mean, calling them and asking them is a good way to clarify, but my personal opinion is I would look up exactly what is written down in the Tax Act, because that is what they'll go off of if you ever get into a dispute with them. All right, so that is the basis of PST. Now I'm gonna stop my screen share here and we'll go back. We can.
Good job, Trevor.
Yeah, and we do have lots of, and we're gonna have lots. 15 minutes for questions. Awesome.
Yeah.
Because we got some started here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just trying to scroll back to see how far. I got to go back.
My question was answered with the list that he provided.
Okay.
Yeah, that can get really, really complicated, and it, you try and be politically correct in what the government's interpretation of their laws is, because I mean that's the basis of the Income Tax Act. Is it says right in there, interpretation. You have to read through it, and it's complicated. Like, it's pretty heavy stuff. So yeah, the basis is if you operate on reserve land and you're selling to someone else who is also on reserve land, you do not have to charge GST and PST. If you buy stuff off reserve, I mean, have it delivered. You save yourself 11%. Why wouldn't you?
Okay, so the first question I have is, I have a client in the United States. Do I charge GST to them when they live there and I do the service from Canada?
That's an electronic service, like probably an online coaching or some product. Oh, either way, no, you don't.
Okay. If my home business is exempt from retail sales, but I provide service and I am exempt from charging PST, do I need to file the Nill report?
Sorry, I meant I'm not allowed to have retail sales. Like I'm not allowed to sell things.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
No
You're
problem.
not allowed to sell things.
So you're
Yeah, like when I got my business license, I came with a pamphlet that said I'm not allowed to sell like retail sales from my house.
or your home-based business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I provide a service and I don't have to charge PST because it was on that list that Trevor showed. Do I still have to file Nill reports?
No, because you won't be registered for PST.
Well, I'm just going to ask you on that one because as a management consultant, I'm also exempt, but annually I get a PST report to fill out, but I'm exempt. I've never charged PST in my many years.
And they still require you to fill out a Nill report?
Well, I didn't do anything with it this year. I'll give it to my accountant. But
That's
in the
typically what
past,
happens.
we always did fill out a Nill report. And I'm just thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I even on somebody's list?
Yeah, I mean, that is okay. So if you aren't registered for PST and you're on the exemption list, you do not need to register.
No.
But I don't know why, Sherilyn, why you would be registered for PST.
I'm not registered for PST. That's what shocks me when I get this report. I just got one the other day.
Yeah, I mean, if you get one, just fill out a Nill report and send it in. I mean, I can't really state the intricacies of the provincial government and their wisdom. So you shouldn't have to. It seems like a lot of extra paperwork, but I mean, if they're requesting it, just fill out a Nill report and send it in. It takes like 2 minutes, or
Yeah, I
get your accountant to do it.
Just makes me mad.
Trevor, can we just go back to my question for a second?
Sure.
You said that I don't have to have a PST number, but when I filled out my business license for the province, I think I did sign up something for PST.
Okay.
And like my
well,
second question, I think, is why we signed up for that. Like if I'm exempt from charging PST, am I still eligible to be PST exempt when I buy supplies for my business?
And that could be why
Okay.
they would give you a PST number, because you'll have what's it called? Hang on a second.
I imagine the number I would have got would be the registered consumer number.
Yeah, so
Okay.
in that case you can buy your products PST exempt.
Okay.
But you still may be required to fill out a Nill report, and all it is no, I have not made any taxable sales.
Okay, and they'll just send that to me like they send one to Sherilyn.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll get one every year. You'll write Nill on it.
Thank you.
Put zeros in, send her back.
So I think moving along to my next one. What if I bought electronic components online from the US and paid PST, but was to be resold or included in the final product to the customer? How do I charge this?
That's what I figured. But I just asked, like, if I'm exempt from charging PST, am I still able to like save the PST?
How do I charge the PST is the question. Sorry.
Oh, if your business is set up to where you are exempt from charging GSP or from charging PST, you don't charge it to your clients. I mean, when you buy it, you should provide them with your PST number, and you should be able to buy it exempt.
Even if this question is, I bought from the components online from the US and I paid PST, but was to then they resell them in their final product to a customer. Do they charge the PST?
I actually did charge them PST on the full amount. So basically I bought components, added it to the final piece of equipment.
Okay.
Which then the full invoice was for all my services and the components. So
Okay.
It was basically resold to them, and I did charge PST on the full invoice. I should be able to use that PST that I paid from the components as a tax deduction or credit?
Yeah, well, no, you don't get a credit with PST, but it would be an expense associated with completing your final product. Right? It's not like GST where you can claim an input tax credit. There's no input tax credits with PST. But yes, you would be correct in that, yes, it's an expense occurred in order to produce your final product. So yes, you can claim the PST there as an expense.
As an expense or because I resold the component? Because the second part of that paragraph in there said that if it's an item being resold, because another question I had is wire, Moretz, any supplies that I have that I didn't supply a PST number to the people I bought it from.
Mm-hmm.
So they charged me PST.
Yep.
On all the wiring and everything else.
Okay.
And then I resold that or basically included it in my final invoice to the customer.
Gotcha.
Would those fall under that tax? There was a tax credit thing if it's a component being resold. Is that?
No, the components that are resold, you should be able to purchase exempt with your PST number, right?
Is there a part, sorry to interrupt, it's Jenny with Sage Hill. Is there not a place where that if you do buy something and you pay PST on it, in the case of this, and then you're going to resell it and charge PST again, PST is only supposed to be paid once, right?
Yes.
Can you not, there is a line on there where you can claim that, can you not take that PST off of your remittance because you shouldn't have paid it in the first place?
Yes, there is a line there, but I mean, the best way to do it is to give them your PST number so you're not stuck filling that out. But there is a line there for items that are resold that you do pay PST on, where you can claim it.
I don't know if you, can you do that for items that you buy from the US? Can you give them a PST number? I haven't seen it on.
I mean, your US suppliers are charging you PST?
Because it comes through Amazon, it's put into their.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on your supplier. I mean, they should honor your PST number because you are buying components that will eventually be final sale to the client. I mean, if not, you can just claim it when you remit your PST.
Okay.
As a credit or as a resale item, or what line item do I put it under? It's kind of what I'm.
Okay, our next question, does personal coaching fall under consulting? And then it also says, what about other personal services such as yoga classes, Reiki services?
I would have to, I think that would fall under personal services. I mean,
I'll interrupt again. I know here from what we do from the Sage Hill office and when we're helping clients is we actually call into the PST office. There's a phone number that I should have it and supplied it. And if you explain your business, they actually go through the bulletins and they'll find out exactly, and they'll tell you yes, no, and you can actually ask them to email you a copy that you can keep on file in your taxes so that if you're ever questioned that you can have proof of it. I know we've had clients do that.
yeah, like, I mean, the list of businesses for PST, for me to be able to remember off the top of my head who falls into what, I was like, oh, okay.
And there's about, yeah, most times we just phone in. That's the easiest way.
Jenny,
Yeah.
can you email Dawn that phone number?
Yes, I sure will.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
My next one. Where can I find detailed list of services that you have to charge GST or PST on?
So where you're going to find the list of GST is going to be under Revenue Canada, under their GST, under the section of, under their GST section, they'll have a listing of services. And again, just with the Saskatchewan government, if you're unsure, if you're not sure where your business falls or what exactly category it would be in, I would call them. They have a business line specifically for GST, and just explain your business, and they'll say, okay, you know, you're subject or you're not subject to remitting GST. It's the same with the PST.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always call them, and they just, one thing, just make sure you have them send you something in writing. You say, you know what, if I'm exempt from charging GST and PST, can you just send me which section I fall under, or have them tell you which section you fall under, write it down, and then make sure you confirm it yourself, just so you're sure you're well within the laws.
Because what we're talking about is that they're called the Saskatchewan Sales Tax Bulletins, and every business falls under one of these bulletins, but there's, what is there, 40 or 50 of them?
Yeah, there's quite a number.
Yeah, I'm as we're talking, I'm trying to find the phone number, so I'll try to get it in the chat here before we all end. The next question, what about supplies I paid PST? Oh, we did that one already.
Next one's from Dave.
Yeah. Do you have to charge GST or PST on US hunting clients for outfitting in Canada? I am over $30,000.
Is it a service that's provided within Canada? Yes.
The answer would be yes.
Then you're required to charge and remit GST and PST. I mean, you should, if you're over $30,000 in revenue, you should be claiming your GST input tax credits anyways.
Now, Dave, just further, if the business is actually if the outfitter is hunting on reserve land and they are treaty, then they would be exempt from those taxes. Is that correct, Trevor?
No, because they're selling to someone who is not treaty.
Ah, okay.
Right?
Okay.
Okay, the next one. I am a registered Indian under the Indian Act, operating a small sole proprietor consulting business. Most of my clients are also Indigenous, with my service being delivered on reserve. However, I sometimes also provide service to non-Indigenous clients in person and remotely. Do I charge GST to those clients, or is the 30,000 threshold my first tax exemption test?
So the $30,000 threshold is on taxable supplies, or not taxable supplies, sorry, is on taxable sales. Right, so all your sales that are on reserve wouldn't be considered taxable, so they would not be subject to the threshold limit.
So then only when when she reaches $30,000 in sales to non-Indigenous off-reserve clients, then she has to start charging them.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now this was when I answered the question about tax paid on items purchased for resale. I'm just going to share this with you guys because I feel like I didn't answer that question well enough, because it can get, how do I share my screen?
Go up to the top, share screen, as long as the file is open. You got to go to that little toolbar.
Yeah.
Maybe it's at the bottom.
It could be at the bottom of your screen.
It's the bottom of my screen here. Right here. Okay. Now, this is a PST worksheet. I had to dig around to find it a little bit. But right here, scroll down. Tax paid on items purchased for resale. Right here. Tax refunded to customer, tax written off on bad debts. This is the worksheet you use to figure out your PST remittance. So yes, when you pay tax, especially, I forget the gentleman's name. He was buying electronic components on Amazon.
Phil.
Phil. Right here. This is the worksheet you use. PST worksheet supplement. And this line right here, line 2. That's the line you put it on. Okay?
And how do you go about remitting this if you've already put in all your taxes?
Call them and tell them you want to do an adjustment. right? The government will be really good about, they're good about allowing you to file adjustments. Shouldn't be an issue.
And where do I get this sheet?
It's just PST worksheet. It's in the sets program. I can, you know what? I'll forward a copy to Jessica and she'll get it out to you guys.
That would be awesome.
Because it's, yeah, unless you have this worksheet when you're figuring it out, it can be really complicated.
My accountant also mentioned there's something with items that you keep in stock at the end of the year. So if you have a bunch of, so an electric contractor, if he hasn't, you know, he's got a stockpile of pipe and wire and labels and whatever else.
Yeah.
Does that get handled differently? Because he's asking me for what value of items I currently have on stock that you're using out of your own private stock.
Oh, he wants you to do a year-end inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Typically, with the PST, it's only once you make the final sale that you claim it back. Right. But what he's asking you for is he's doing your personal income tax. He wants to know how much stuff you have on hand for your inventory amounts. Doesn't have a whole lot to do with your PST amount though. That's more of a year-end tax, total inventory on hand, supplies on hand question.
Okay, I think I'm coming to the end of it. I got one more. Unless, Phil, did you have more questions with that?
Always, but I'll let it absorb a little bit first.
Okay.
Well, Phil, you can always email me if you have more questions that you want answered. You can, my contact information is in the chat here. You guys can send me off an email. I'm more than happy to answer anything you have.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
not
you.
a problem.
One more. I'm in the category Office Health Practitioner. Do I charge PST or GST on all of the invoices? I have a PST and a GST account.
Under health practitioner, I'm pretty sure health practitioners were exempt from GST and PST, if I remember correctly. The reason you have the GST and the PST numbers, especially the GST, is to claim the input credits. Does that answer your question?
That was Richard.
Okay, Richard.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thanks.
Okay, no problem.
Then as a retailer of a U.S. apparel, do you need to charge and remit PST and GST if you're still under the $30,000?
Okay, so the threshold for PST is $10,000. Let's clarify that. The threshold for GST is 30,000. So if you're under 30, but over 10, yes, you have to register and charge for PST for taxable sales within the province of Saskatchewan. So are you buying product from an apparel retailer in the US and reselling it here? Or is, I need a little more background on your business there to be able to give you some.
Not sure who that was.
Yes.
Oh, yes, there's the answer, yes.
Okay, so yes, if you're reselling product within Saskatchewan, right? If you're over $10,000, you have to charge and remit the PST. If you're under the $30,000 threshold, you're not required to charge and remit GST because you'd be considered a small supplier. There.
I have one. This is our last question. I'm a co-owner of a B&B, and if a government group wants to rent the space, can they use their PST number for exemptions on their stay?
I'm assuming by government group, you mean Government of Saskatchewan group?
Melissa,
I would assume.
She said yes.
Okay. As far as I know, yes, that would be correct. They can use the PST number for exemption. It's just like if you're bidding on any contract work for the Saskatchewan government, you do not charge them PST. I mean, because you're just going to turn around and give it back to them. Crown corporations are different. You charge Crown corporations PST, and I mean that can get really complicated really quickly as to who gets charged PST and who doesn't. But as far as I know, yes, that would be correct. The government group, like obviously it's the government of Saskatchewan, they're renting your space. They want to use their PST number as an exemption.
With that, I think we'll cut the questions off because I see Jessica nodding at me. Jessica, I included the PST toll-free number in there, and I'll make sure Jessica includes that along with a link to where you can find the bulletins. But there's so many of them, the best bet is still to phone in. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Trevor. This was, I think, very informative. And I think we got through most of the questions. But like we said, we'll make sure you get Trevor's contact information. We'll make sure everybody gets the link to the video because it has been recorded today. And Sherilyn's contact information is in there, and ours is in there too, because we can also help direct people in the right direction.